Були у нас мрії, плани, але рашистська ракета влучила саме в наш під'їзд. Ці плани в нас рухнули.
And when we opened the door to the next room, there was no room. We saw an abyss from the 9th floor to the 1st floor. Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Euro-Atlantic Course. And I'm your host, Miroslava Yaremkiv. January 14th, the terrorist attack on a residential building in the city of Dnipro is one of those events where you remember where you were when you found out the news. You read about explosions in Dnipro during a massive Russian missile attack. At the same time, there were reports about explosions in other regions, so you don't pay that much attention to that particular blast in Dnipro. And then after some time, in the news feed, you see that picture. You see the picture of a residential building with the core of it gone, transformed into a mountain of jumbled concrete. You see this kind of buildings a lot. A panel 9-story apartment buildings, they're very common in Ukraine. So you know how many people must have been there in their apartments on a Saturday afternoon. Your heart drops in shock. You don't want to believe what you see. You feel sad, you feel furious, you feel powerless. In today's episode, we're going to hear testimonies of people who lived in that particular entrance of the building that was destroyed by a Russian rocket. They survived, but their whole life is gone now. If you want to learn more about this subject, please continue watching this video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our videos in the future. We're going to start with Serhiy and Yulia Fedorovy. Their family was preparing for a festive dinner that day, as it is New Year according to the old calendar, or Saint Vasily Day. Families usually gather together on that day in Ukraine, and they're going to share their story of what happened after the explosion.
Мене звати Федорова Юлія. Ми з моєю родиною проживали за адресою Набережна Перемога 118 в під'їзді, який розрушили. Ми були в цей час з дітьми, 2 дітей у нас і батьків. Ця квартира, я народилась в ній, це все моє дитинство проходило в ній. Були у нас мрії, плани, але рашистська ракета влучила саме в наш під'їзд. Ці плани в нас рухнули. Немає далі, ми живі, але життя такого яскравого вже не буде і немає. Маємо надію, що все ж таки ми переживемо цю трагедію. Діти дуже налякані, ми їх зігріваємо своєю турботою.
Ну, а що саме трапилось? Де ви були в цей час?
Ми в цей час знаходились в квартирі. Доброго дня, мене звуть Федоров Сергій, я чоловік. Ми знаходились цей день всією сім'єю, святковий день, знаходились в квартирі всі. Хтось знаходився в кухні, хтось знаходився там в другій кімнаті. І коли стався вибух, я не розумію, яким чудом, але фізично практично ми не постраждали.
Це було дуже гучно. Так?
Це було дуже гучно. У мене до наступного, один день, легка контузія, голова гуділа, зараз все добре. У тещі ще є залишкові оцієї контузії.
А як діти і батьки?
Діти вже...
Психологічно діти дуже це важко пережили.
Пережили, да. Але ми їх підтримуємо, кажемо ще...
Їм було лячно, як це от.
Дуже лячно, дуже.
І ми не розуміємо, як ми вижили, чесно.
А як вони поводили себе? От роздався вибух, що вони Де вони були і що вони робили? Там, ну, десь там пішли к вам, там, захисту
Діти були
просити.
з нами на кухні, ми готували їжу і сідали вже за стіл, щоб обідати.
Ну, сісти за святковий
І
стіл.
коли стався вибух, у нас все попадало в кухні, стінки затрусилися, і ми побігли в коридор, де мали надію, що ми там залишимося живі. Діти плакали, звичайно, в них шок був. Це
І
було
вашу
важко.
квартиру завалило там, да? Тобто,
В квартирі
Ну, вікна, двері вибило всередину квартири.
Немає лісничної клітини.
Так. Ну, ми побачили після вибуху, зразу зрозуміли, що обвалилося, ну, весь під'їзд наш.
ага.
І, ну, але так як я в варті Дніпра, нас трошки навчали цьому, як поводити себе, ну, готувалися в таких ситуаціях. Я, ну, по-перше, почав там максимально забирати всіх в дальню кімнату, ну, щоб на випадок обрушення, ну, максимально
від стінки,
від
якої не
стінок,
було.
так,
Ага.
да. Ну, і ну, трошки говтавшись там, буквально почав там, ну, як навчали, перше там документи, ну, саме головне документи ми.
І що вас вас рятуючи, треба було демонтувати стіну, так?
З сусіднього під'їзду. Нас
А
виводили.
рятували нас, так як клітина впала, тобто ми очікували, поки МЧС нас, ну, ДСНС забере, але
Нас визволили через сусідній під'їзд, вибивши
так.
стінку на балконі. І ми через це віконечко
Де ви зараз знаходитесь? Ну, фізично?
зараз знайомі, ну, предоставили квартиру, так,
де ми можемо
де ми
проживати.
можемо зараз
Тимчасово.
Ну, ви сподіваєтесь, що влада вам допоможе?
Так,
І так?
Звичайно, маємо надію
звичайно.
тільки на владу, що нам
Звичайно.
виділять житло, де ми будемо мешкати і строїтись наші мрії.
Ну, а вже є які, ну, дані, що таке відбудеться?
Влада нічого поки не обіцяє. Ми очікуємо оцінку майна і надалі тільки очікуємо.
Зараз доступу в квартиру немає, так?
Доступу
Немає.
немає.
And now we're going to hear the story of Olga Botvynova, who was with her husband that day. Their apartment is fully destroyed, but they miraculously survived. Olga's story is especially heart-wrenching when you find out that Olga is from Donetsk and fled the war there in 2014. Then she moved to Kherson, where she met the beginning of the full-scale invasion and lived under Russian occupation for almost 3 months. Then she and her husband finally escaped Kherson, settled down in Dnipro, and rented this apartment. And then January 14th happened. So let's hear her story. It was the scariest and the happiest day of our lives because it was our second birthday. What do I remember? How we woke up, came to our senses, or rather saw all that had happened. We were in the apartment, we were in the room. When you realize that you were alive, that you had arms, legs, that there was your husband nearby who was also alive. My husband is a doctor, a surgeon. He quickly got his bearings. He says, let's take our documents and go out. And when we opened the door to the next room, there was no room. We saw an abyss from the 9th floor to the 1st floor. It was a shock for me personally. It was fear. We heard the screams of people, but there were fewer and fewer every minute. Then my husband realized that I had a wound in the temple. It bled very badly. He gave me the first aid he could provide in those conditions. He plugged the wound and set me against the wall on the floor of the room we were in. While doing that, he signaled to the rescuers to save us. What did I feel at the moment? The first feeling I had when I regained consciousness, when I was conscious, was total gratitude for being alive. There was no fear, horror, or aggression. It all came later. The first feeling was that you were alive and your loved one was also alive. In that state, against the wall with the tampon in my hand and pressing on the wound, I sat for about 3 hours. I vaguely remember, but I remember I was conscious. And the rescue guys came to us very quickly, about 3 hours later. We expected the rescue to take much longer. When we arrived at the hospital, we were operated on. I was operated on. I was already unconscious and don't remember well. I don't remember the moment of the explosion. I remember that it was Saturday. It was a holiday. We were in a wonderful mood. I was asked, "Did you have a premonition?" No, I didn't. My husband and I were in a very good mood. Half an hour later, he returned home. I worked at a computer in a room that no longer exists. I would have worked that way. They turned off the lights, turned off the internet. It wasn't very warm in the house. He says, "Let's lie down on the sofa." The sofa was headboard to the windowsill. We lay down on the sofa with phones in our hands, which also helped us, and covered ourselves with a blanket. And when we came to our senses, we saw what had happened. Frames, balconies, they just flew over our heads to the back of the room. The next rooms were no longer there at that moment. We were lucky that it was still a little light. There was smoke, there were screams, there was horror all around. We didn't realize the scale of it yet, but it was a little light. When we opened the door, we intuitively did not go out, but saw that there was nowhere to go. The phones were in our hands, and that saved us. My husband had a phone. I was bleeding. I couldn't do anything, couldn't use a phone. My husband had a phone in his hands, but there was no signal. The signal appeared probably a bit later, so he signaled with a flashlight that was in our house. The man with the flashlight was my husband. He signaled to the guys that we were alive. In fact, he thought the whole house was doing that, signaling from every window. But there was no one to signal. Why? Because the people who were injured couldn't even go to the window. You know, I didn't feel pain. My temple was broken, but I felt no pain. This is the state when the body gives you some kind of second life, gives you all the strength to hold out. My husband was very worried that I would not lose consciousness, because he understood the severity of the situation. Because then I would not have been able to reach the firefighter's ladder. At that moment, my body gave me a very powerful push. I didn't feel any pain. I just wanted to be rescued. But now my whole body hurts. That was just a miracle. When you came to your senses, you are, of course, happy that you are alive. You thank God for being alive. I'm thankful that I can live. Other people don't have this option. Hundreds of people are in a terrible state. Many have died, and thousands of destinies have been destroyed. You've been watching the special project by Ukraine Media Center and Euro-Atlantic course dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!